Hello and welcome to the Life After Diets podcast. I'm Sarah Dosanjh, psychotherapist and author of the book I Can't Stop Eating.
And I'm Stefanie Michele, binge recovery health coach. If you feel out of control around food, we get it because we've been there.
Thank you for joining our conversations about how to make peace with food and feel more comfortable in our bodies.
Now on to this week's episode. Boom, boom. Hi, Sarah.
Are you going to leave the boom boom in?
No, but maybe now we have to. We were just recording some things and we had to separate out, where we wanted to edit a bit. And we started, what did you say? La, 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 la?
Yeah, because I thought on the script, I would see all the la, 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 la's in the transcript, and then I could find the bit I wanted to cut out.
Yeah, I added the boom, boom.
Yeah.
Let's just start over.
I don't think so. It's not going to mean anything.
No.
To anybody.
All right.
Or anything.
This is our first recording since we did the workshop.
No, it's
London.
not.
It's not?
We recorded a couple of episodes last week.
Sorry, I'm losing track of time.
That's okay. By the time this comes out, that will have been a long time ago. In fact, we'll be thinking more about our next workshop.
We had a lot of British guests at our last workshop, and this time we're hosting it in good old NYC.
Yes.
Saturday, May 6th.
And you are the host because it's your country, and that means that the success or failure of it is all on your shoulders.
Hey, listeners, if you have any allegiance to me and you live in the United States of America.
Or if you don't and you want to get on a flight, we can
make a weekend of it. We can just, come see the city. It's spring in New York.
Yeah.
A lovely time to see the skyscrapers.
Exactly. Are there any things that we still have to do that we should be doing? We know we should be doing, but we're struggling to get ourselves to do it.
I think we're pretty on it.
Yeah, we're all right. But in case you missed my really smooth segue, that was the topic of today's episode. The things that we feel like we should be doing that we're not able to do it. I don't know about you, Steph, but this is a really common message I get. I know what I should be doing, but I can't get myself to do it. In the context of food and body image that we talk about here. I think this topic speaks to a bigger theme in life for many people. Why is it we don't do the things that we know will help us? The things that we know will make us feel better. But often the first thing that I say to people when they say this, because there's often a should in there.
Yeah.
And I'll turn it around. I'll say, okay, what are the things you are thinking you should be doing? And often people struggle to articulate what they actually are. They think they know what they're supposed to be doing, and they're not doing this thing that they think they know that they're supposed to be doing. But when they're actually asked to articulate the thing that they think they're supposed to be doing, it's not always that easy. Yeah. Yeah.
I think sometimes it is. I've had clients who are able to articulate it. In a couple of cases I can think of off the top of my head, I'm actively working with two people in particular right now that this is what we're doing. Like that idea of, I know that going for a walk or moving and being outside or socializing and connecting is helpful to me, but that is the very thing that is very difficult. And there's a lot of frustration with self around why am I not doing this? And I wonder sometimes if more to the point is the why that people seek. Like, why am I not doing this, more so than the just get me to do it kind of thing, or feeling like that's the question.
And even if the thing is movement, for example, getting really specific, what are the things that you believe you could be or should be doing around movement? Because it might be these really vague ideas of, I should be moving my body more, or I should be exercising.
Well, can I share? So when I came to visit you.
Yes.
So for those who haven't heard me say this, Sarah seriously does this yoga practice that she talks about here on the podcast. I went to see her. I stayed in her flat. And every morning, I assume, because I think I was still sleeping, I think I was a bit jet lagged, but I'm pretty sure that every morning you woke up and did your yoga. And then when we were going to bed at night, you took your time. And after I was in my room with my door closed, you went and you did your yoga. And I can see that it's a consistent practice for you. And so I don't know that it brought up a should in my own brain, but yoga is something that I feel like would be great for me, especially for my anxiety. And I've practiced it here and there, but not consistently. I think at one point in my life, it would have felt like a should. Like I should do what Sarah does. And I did notice that last night, actually, it was creeping up to 8:30 at night, and my kids go to bed at 9. And I said to my oldest daughter, I said, let's go upstairs and do some yoga. Like, let's kind of wind down in this half an hour before bed. And and then I started to do it. And then about 10 minutes in, I was like, I am done. I don't want to do this for 30 minutes. And I abandoned it. But I suppose what I'm taking from it is that I think I can identify the reasons why I don't. And also at the same time feel like I wish that I did. You know what I mean? I wish that I did feel a little bit different than I should at this point. And maybe that slight shift of language is a bit of a freedom to be able to move from like, I should be doing this to like, I wish that I would do that, or I wish that I wanted to do that, or I wish that I had the time and space to do that, or the patience to do this. I'm working on it, or maybe that's something I will work towards. Um, but the should itself, if that was the voice in my head saying like you should, or you should finish this to 30 minutes, I would feel like a failure today. And I don't actually.
That comes up for me around gardening and
Hmm.
growing herbs or herbs and plants and that kind of thing. I wish I was the kind of person who enjoyed that. And I've tried to be that person and just failed miserably at it. And at the time I did, I thought, why can't I stick to this thing? I mean, this was years ago. I think I have got to a point where I have to, one, really see the benefits of something that I'm doing, especially if it's something that's outside of my routine. And I've shared before, yoga built up really slowly over a period of time. It was 5 minutes in the early days, once a day. But I noticed the differences because I think I really somatize my emotions. When I'm feeling stressed, like I can feel it all in my body. If I notice, if I stop to check in and
Mm.
everything will get all tensed up. And that changed, like my whole body changed from doing something like yoga, even though I'm still not very flexible. And I hear it when people will say, I need to do this, because sometimes people will recognize the should's not helpful and they turn it to need. I need to start being more mindful when I eat. I need to be journaling. I need to this. I need to that. And for me, I've always had to step back and go, I don't have to do any of it, but I can. I can choose to. I have to take that pressure. There's this rebellious pushback part of me that when I feel like I have to do something or I should do something, there's a pushback against that. And there's only two ways through that that I've seen that I think work for me. One is taking the pressure off myself and asking myself, is there something I actually want to do? When I take the pressure off, sometimes it gets a little bit clearer and I might go, oh, actually, yeah, no, this is something I still want to do. Or I'll go, no, it's not. And the other one is just that there's an immovable deadline. So it has to be done at some point. And as I get close to the deadline, my stress levels are going to rise a bit. And that will give me the
Mm.
motivation. It's not probably not the most helpful motivation to do it from a stressed place, but I think a lot of people experience this with deadlines and all manner of things in life for those things that we really don't want to do.
Part of it for me is because you know how I believe that there's reasons why we're not doing something. And part of it for me is identifying that. So for example, in the example of yoga last night, I was able to show up to do it because there was a part of me that really did want to wind down. So to your point about having a perceived benefit that will come of it. So to me it was I'm a little bit wound up and I'd like to wind down. And part of inviting my daughter was a way that I got that done too, because it felt like, oh, I could do this for her as well, which felt like offloading the responsibility on myself felt a little easier. But once I was engaged in it, I really got to this almost meditative state in the beginning of I showed up and it was Adrian, yoga with Adrian. And she was like, you showed up and that's the most important thing. And I was like, I did, didn't I? And I was sitting there and it felt good and I was getting something from it. But 10 minutes in, I was no longer getting something from it. It had almost like served its purpose for me. And then I was noticing myself thinking, "Ugh, I don't want to be doing this though." But then a voice came in of like, but you should. You should want to push through that discomfort. That's part of the should. This was part of the place I had to make peace with because I realized that the value of doing yoga in yesterday alone for me was to just simply wind down. It wasn't to push through uncomfortable emotions. It wasn't to learn to sit in something for the sake of it. And that's almost what it was turning into. And I came to that in my own mind of the value here for you has been accessed And now it's turning into something else. Like the practice is becoming about something else that just wasn't part of my value system of that moment. So I gave myself permission to stop. Whereas I think a former version of myself would have said, no, now you have to stay not just to wind down, but because yoga's good for you and it's supposed to be mental, it's resilience and mental toughness and learning to be with those emotions. And I was like, but no, that wasn't what I was after right then. So to have that clarity around, no, this is what I wanted. Yeah, sure. I'd love to sit through more emotions and have more mental toughness, but that's not what I'm after at this moment. And I think that when we have the shoulds where one unlocks so many more, you know what I mean? I think sticking to one idea of what we're after is so much less overwhelming than all the millions of things I'd like to be working on and improving in my life. You know what I mean? I think that's the part where it's easier to just give up and be like, never mind, I can't do this because of course, I think there's clarity in identifying a single purpose or a single mission sometimes, and also to give yourself permission to do it sometimes instead of all the time or as a now I have to do it every night because I started it this one night and you do it every night, you know?
Well, this is reminding me of the consistency episode, and we talked a lot about the benefits of consistency and doing things in small manageable pieces. I think there's another piece to it. If we're talking about recovery from disordered eating and healing body image, there are probably a lot of things out there that people have heard that maybe we might call them recovery tools, things that we could be doing or practicing that are going to support us in this journey. I think there needs to be something about giving yourself permission to do something inconsistently. Because that's what I heard in yours. It wasn't this, oh, I'm going to start doing yoga every night with my daughter. It was, I'm going to do this thing tonight and see if it helps me. And it helped up until a point. I think people put this pressure, the all or nothing thinking that's like, if I am going to start using this recovery tool, I better make damn sure that I get it right. And I'm doing it
Yeah.
consistently because if I do it and then the next time I don't do it, somehow by not doing it the next time I failed and the first time was just completely negated. It didn't matter that I did it that one time.
Yes. And that's the perfectionism. And I would even go so far as to say, like, even if maybe I will feel like winding down tonight and I still won't do it. And that doesn't mean I didn't do it yesterday. And it doesn't mean I can't do it tomorrow or next week or never again. It's just, I was talking yesterday about this. I saw a meme recently that said, turns out my mom was right. I just didn't like her tone. And I laughed when I read it and it was, I was like, "Ah." And then I thought of my dad and I was like, that's where I would apply it. And then I was like, you know what? That might be the source of a lot of my inner conflict. This should sometimes represents something that may be of benefit to us, but because it's delivered as a should, there's a rebel rousing around it. I know in my own childhood that was an origins point for me of that internal battle, which we can, I think, call the self-sabotage, which we also have an episode around. And it feels very internal and like it's our own stuff. But sometimes I think it's the messaging we get maybe as in childhood or maybe just socially and culturally, the shoulds of what we're supposed to be doing. And not in a malicious way. Even you saying I do yoga at night and in the morning is you're not telling me that I should, but there's something internalized about yoga in general that feels like a cultural should. And that creates this like, well, no, I'm not going to do that, or where that pressure system exists, there's going to be the resistance around it. And so that perfectionism, I think, is part of the should. And I think that that's a rampant thing in our culture, even from a benevolent point of view. I think that where it's dispensed as advice or self-help tools that we can read articles about, it's not necessarily shaming us for not doing it, but there's such a plethora of information about how to help ourselves out there that we're rarely given the chance to look in and say, like, what makes sense for me. We're just always consuming the shoulds from the outside, and there's too many of them to keep up with. But yet there's this feeling and pressure like we should be doing that. So I think part of that rebel spirit is natural and normal and clarifying a singular. I guess I'm tracing myself back to my last point, but focusing on what is truly valuable, I think to me is really helpful to name what it is I'm working on right now. And maybe the rest of the stuff will happen in the future.
I'll ask you this as someone you just mentioned that you have this rebel in you. I recognize that in myself. Okay, so there might be an idea that there are some things that we should do. And when you have a rebel in you and there are things that you should do, How do you reconcile that? Or are we saying there really are no shoulds? So if I'll just throw an example at you. You have kids that you send off to school, and there is a obligation that you are going to send them off with lunch, right? They don't get fed at
Uh-huh.
school, do they?
They can,
So
but okay.
yeah. So that doesn't feel like a choice. And it might be, let's say you're somebody who really resents that particular task. How do you reconcile the things that you should do with the rebel that may not want to do that?
Well, part of it is the have to. I think that when it comes to this was I can relate more to this if we talk about getting up in the morning. So I used to be a night owl. I would spend the nights awake, and then I had this idea that I should still be getting up at 7 a.m. or something to be a productive human, and would not, I would just sleep in, and I that was a big thing for me. And then when I had a child, I had to get up when she did. She got up at 7 a.m. My oldest used to get up at 7 a.m. on the dot, like clockwork, this child. And I had to get up. And that the idea that I didn't have a choice, gosh, it's really interesting to even think this through, because you would think that that would create more rebel, that, because I really didn't have a choice, that there would be something more resentful. But it wasn't. It was actually like when I really felt like I didn't have a choice, I did the thing. When it was my own pressure system, my own feeling like I don't have a choice, that was where a rebel was more likely to come in, when I did have a little bit of a choice and I was saying no to myself. But external have tos actually have prompted me to act with less resentment more of the time,
Mm.
which is where accountability, I think, comes in for so many people, of feeling like I can do it if I'm held accountable on the outside, but not in my internal desire to do something.
How I would think of that is it's about whether this is something that can be negotiated or not. If it can be negotiated, there's a should, but there's still a sense of negotiation. I potentially could go down that rabbit hole of negotiating with myself till I'm too tired and stressed from negotiating with myself that I don't do the thing, whatever it might be. When there are things that are just non-negotiables, like certain deadlines that come up, they're just non-negotiables.
Mhm.
Don't have to negotiate. But if I go into negotiate with myself with a load of shoulds, it doesn't feel like a free or fair negotiation. That's where the pushback is
Yeah.
gonna be. 'Cause I think I shared right back in the early episodes when I was going in the sea in the morning when I was living down by the beach, and I would literally open my eyes when that alarm went off early, and I'd be getting out of bed just going, "Don't negotiate, don't negotiate, don't negotiate." Because the minute I stopped and thought through what I'm about to do, that part of me that didn't want to leave my warm bed and go and jump in the freezing sea was probably gonna have its way, and then later
Yeah.
on, I'm gonna be feeling disappointed about that. How do you cope with the disappointment part when if you've
Mm.
had this experience, maybe you're somebody who's just so true to their word, but if you
No.
have that experience of, "I'm gonna do this thing because I think it will be really great, or because I think it's something I need to do," you don't do it?
Yeah. That was a story of my life before, so I do relate. And again, it's less so now, which is interesting to me because I'm trying to think of these examples now. But one that comes to mind is when I lived in London, and I was living with my friend, and she said, and I was complaining. I was like, I wanna walk to Hyde Park, which was right down the street, and walk after class instead of coming home to binge and then sleep, and then, I felt like I was creating my own misery. So she was like, "Okay, put your sneakers on and walk to Hyde Park at 3 o'clock today. Like when you get home, do that." And I was like, "Yeah, yeah, yes, that's what I want." And then I inevitably every day would get home and not every day. This was actually the impetus of us no longer being friends, because she became so frustrated with me. I mean, this was really the straw that broke the camel's back. But she was like, she's a woman of her word, and she's one of those people that what she says she's going to do, she does. She does not understand the inner conflict. To her, it's very clear. And this was not so to me, because I was negotiating with myself about time, like, oh, maybe I'll go at 4, or maybe I don't have to go today because it's almost like raining, or I don't want to go today. There was a lot of room for me to not just go do it. And so I became incredible. I mean, that disappointment is too light of a word. I hated myself for not following through. It seemed so simple. It was like, All you have to do, and this is how my friend would later explain her exasperation, like, all you have to do is put shoes on and walk. I don't get it. What is so hard about this? It's like step 1, step 2, step 3. And I can understand looking back why it seems so simple to a brain that is not overwhelmed and not full of a million different conversations in the head. When you don't hear all those voices and don't have that amount of overwhelm, it is very simple and clear. But when I reflect on how this used to feel chronically, not just in this instance, but anything I was supposed to do, I talked to so many therapists about these plans and we made plans and I couldn't execute ever. If you're suffering, if you're struggling with this, it doesn't matter the plans you make. It doesn't pan out because I guess your question was, how did I deal with the disappointment? And at the time I didn't. I think that I really went into self-loathing. And I suppose now what I would be able to offer myself, and this does happen. I mean, there's things I don't do that I say I'm going to do, mostly around my kids actually now, is I have compassion for, I hate to use the word, it just sounds so cliche, but I really can look at why I don't. And I really understand the side of me that doesn't. Whether that is simply just, I am so overwhelmed that I'm inert, that I can't quite get to it. My body doesn't want to act because there's so many different things it's thinking about or feeling like it has to do or wants to do, that openness of all these decisions to make it is paralyzing me. I have a lot of compassion for that part of myself. Whereas before, that seemed to me like an excuse. It seemed like laziness. I had a lot of shame about that. I no longer believe those things are true. I really, there's too many people that this is a thing for, that there's a reason for this. And where there's a reason for something, I have compassion for it. And so for me, I guess that's how it has evolved and changed, is that I'm no longer carrying the judgment around it. I think I can understand why that would be so, that we wouldn't do the thing.
That just sounds like you had a massive, massive shift in terms of how you saw this kind of behavior, that you reached a place that I think I meet a lot of people who aren't there. And I agree with you 100%. I think you articulated it really well, that there is a reason that is often bigger than the thing itself. The thing itself seems so small, like your friend was saying, even like you would have been telling yourself at that time as well. I think, again, I
Mm.
think I talked about it in one of the episodes near the beginning. I think I spent about 2 months in therapy talking about my procrastination over descaling my Nespresso machine.
I don't remember that.
Session after session, I went in and talked about my struggle to just do this simple thing. All you have to do is put the mixture in and press the button a few times. It's not even like you're taking everything apart and scrubbing it. It's none of that.
Yeah.
I couldn't bring myself to descale this Nespresso machine. And I was so stressed with myself about the fact that I wasn't able to do this small thing. It just didn't seem to make sense, but that meant it just got bigger and bigger in my mind. All the
Yeah.
meaning that is
Yeah.
created around what on earth is wrong with me? Like anybody else could do this. What's wrong with me that I can't just put a sachet in? To be fair, I had to Google which buttons to press when. That
Okay.
was
I
an
think that
extra step.
matters.
It was something
Yeah.
I didn't know how to do. I did have to
Yeah.
find it out, but it was a very simple thing to have found out.
Yeah,
Um
but still, it's like the extra step is just the bit of overwhelm. I'm like that with cooking. I know I wanna make something like your soup. So Sarah made this soup for me when I was there. It was fantastic. It was one of the best soup I ever had. And I wanna make it, but I'm also like, I haven't read through there's just too many steps in between me making it. That's enough. That's enough to be a barrier, and well, TBA. But what happened there with your Nespresso machine? Did you eventually get to doing it? And if so, what made that possible?
It's gonna be a very unsatisfying answer. I'm not sure that I remember. I don't know. I think one day I just had the impetus after talking about it for as long as I had. I think it's because there were so many things that I wasn't doing that I was telling myself I should be doing. And this was like the cherry on the top of it. This was the little bit on the top. And I think
Mhm.
having been talking it through, I seem to remember, it's a bit vague, but I seem to remember my therapist talking about all these things I was telling myself to do. And I think we agreed that I had one thing to do that week, just one thing. And that
Yeah.
was this Nespresso thing. And because I say, I remember making an agreement with her one day that I would do it as soon as I got home. from therapy. And I did it when I walked in the door that day. But it was like I just had to go round and round with it and talk it through and just try and move whatever this energy was around it. I didn't completely release it because I don't think I'd got to the point where I understood any of it yet. But I think there was something around that talking and hitting my head
Yes.
against this thing that eventually loosened something up. And I was like, okay, I've talked about it for 50 minutes. If I go home and do it before I even sit down, I can do this thing.
Yeah.
And then I think I did that. And then I went and did another job I'd been procrastinating over. I can't remember what it was. I can't remember what it was. There was another job as well afterwards that I then did. It's almost like if you're really stuck on something, I don't know if you find this sometimes as well. If there's like a little task you've been procrastinating over, you do it, and then you suddenly have this little burst of
Yeah.
productivity. You go boom, boom, boom. You do these things, and then of
Uh-huh.
course I always go to that. Why didn't you just do that ages ago?
It's an incredible hurdle to begin that, to get that momentum going. Something that's in motion more easily stays in motion versus starting it, right? But I think that's the tool, to be honest, is there's something about the reason. Well, I think there's a couple of things, but one big one is the reason something can feel so hard is because there's so many other things that we also believe we should be doing. It's never just that singular one. And sometimes just naming it, like bringing it to therapy or saying, this is the thing that's really hard for me. And then it becomes a like, okay, then that's the thing. It's not the other little things that are also collected in your mind. Like you start to name this one thing and then it isolates that one thing. And then that becomes more doable.
I think I'm in this place a little bit with the whole preparations to go to New York. So I'm not just going to New York, I'm giving up my tenancy. So there is so much admin involved in that. And there's a few things I have to do that I don't know how to do them yet. And the pressure hasn't built up enough because I still have time, but I keep seeing things and things keep popping into my head that need to be done. And I know that if I did a couple of those things, it would feel easier knowing that I'd done a couple of those things. At the moment, I haven't done anything. And I'm just seeing everything that needs to be done all in one go. And I'm
Right.
feeling it. I feel it in my body. And I feel like at the moment where I am, because this is such a big change for me, and I don't know where I'm going to be living when I get back from New York, but come and join us on the 6th of May. So I just, it feels like a lot. And because it feels like a lot, I'm procrastinating. And the procrastinating is more unsettling than the tasks themselves. I know that. My rational mind knows that. But that was it. I was saying I was feeling it in my body. It's just sort of here, like high up in my chest. And it's like a little it feels like it's something pushing out like against the top of my sternum. And I feel like I'm just carrying it around.
Mm.
It's
I love
there.
how you can do that. That you're connected to your body in such a way.
And I have to keep it I have to. I say I have to because that's what it feels like. I feel like I have to keep acknowledging it because that's what keeps me settled. If I try to ignore that this feeling is here in my sternum, this sort of flutter of there's a lot to
Gosh.
do, I'm not getting it done. I need to keep naming it. Otherwise, I will just try and run away from this sense of unease that I don't even know what it is.
Yeah. Well, you're validating it. Um, I was gonna ask you to breathe into it, like, and you did that naturally. Like, what happens when you like give it space if it's pushing out, like if you give it space in there to have some room?
Well, that's something I'm really enjoying at the moment. There's a yoga position where you lie on the mat and you put a block between your shoulder blades and you have a block under your head. So your shoulders kind of spill off the sides like this and
Mm.
it opens all up the front of your chest. And when I'm doing that at the moment, I'm feeling really quite vulnerable when I do it. There's a sense of this isn't really how I want to be. I want to close in, but there's a sense of knowing that I need to open up. And yeah, that enables me to breathe more and it just opens
Yeah.
that bit up there. But I do that on the mat, I
Yeah.
think is where
Yeah.
I connect with that.
Yeah. The somatic part.
If you want connection and support around any of the topics we talk about on the podcast, we would love for you to join our membership community.
Members have access to monthly online support groups, a private Facebook group, live episode recordings, and member-only Q&As.
If you would like to join us, please head to lifeafterdietspodcast.com/community.
Now let's get back to the episode.
When people say to me, I know what I should be doing, I don't understand why I'm not doing it. When I ask people to be specific about what it is they think they're supposed to be doing, often the answers are really vague. It's like move more or be journaling. And I think it's noticing sometimes the vagueness of these pressures that we put on ourselves. When we get really specific and we say, right, these are the things that I'm believing are going to help me, then we can look at what they are. And then we can really start checking in. Is this actually, do I have the energy for this? Is this the right time to be focusing on this? Which one feels like it's going to give me the most back at the moment? And that kind of thing. I feel like this is a very vague sense for a lot of people, as
Mm.
opposed to sometimes it's specific, but I think not always.
Well, sometimes they're vague and very lofty concepts. So I have a client right now who talks and has been talking a lot about wanting to be more mindful with food. And so we started to focus on, okay, what does that mean? Again, it's a concept that sounds nice, but what does it look like? And to name what it actually looks like. And so we did that. We sort of identified what steps are involved in being mindful, even if they don't cover every base, which I think is part of the overwhelm. Like mindfulness is so many things. Okay, well, let's just pick a couple. And then I isolated it to one of the meals that's tricky. So she tends to have more difficulty eating right after work, that time. So rather than thinking of it like mindfulness all day, you know what I mean? Like there's so many opportunities to be mindful with food in a day, in the course of a day. So we were like, let's just do that after work time, that, the first time you eat after you come in the door, that's all we're going to focus on. The rest of the day, we don't worry about being mindful. It's just this particular time and what mindfulness might look like. And honing in on this has focused the work so much more than talking about it conceptually, which I do a lot. I love to talk about things conceptually, and I do think it has its place because we can then apply it. We plant seeds everywhere, and then but in some cases, I think where there is this thing that we want to be doing, it is so helpful to identify what that really is, what it means, what it looks like, and then to isolate it to a more narrow frame of time or event or something like that, because it makes it more concrete, and then it makes it more manageable.
Planning food is another one that many will say, oh, I need to be doing this and I'm not doing it. I can't seem to get myself to plan food. And for me, I really had to reframe that. I never used the word planning food. I tend to think of it as I'm making some ahead of time decisions, or I'm just having an idea of what I'm going to have for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And I'm still allowed to eat in between, and I'm allowed to change my mind if something else is appealing to me. But I don't enjoy planning meals and planning food much. It is a bit of a chore. So
Yeah.
it's one of those things that I get myself to do it because I know the price that I pay if I don't. Everything feels just more dysregulated and a bit more chaotic. So for me, I know that's a really important way for me to take care of myself. But in order to do it, I had to change what that meant. Like, what is it I'm hoping to get out of planning? And how can I look at this differently? Because there is this resistance to planning. Because whenever I planned, it's always looked more like control or trying to eat
Right.
in a bit of a deficit and all of that. But once I really changed the motivation behind it, actually, is not about sticking to something. It's not about eating less. It's about giving myself nourishment, food, energy on a consistent basis to help level out and regulate my hunger. That then felt a little bit more doable. But again, I started with just getting my breakfast. I know what I'm having for breakfast each day. Let me just find a couple of breakfasts that I know work for me, and then move on to lunch, depending on however your day is set up, because that's another thing, like with your client with mindfulness, if someone's saying I need to be planning, they're probably thinking, oh, I'm supposed to be planning 3 meals and 2 snacks a day.
Right.
Maybe planning or making these decisions is not everything at once. Like bringing that
Right.
bringing that bar in a bit so that you can hit it at least some of
Yeah,
the time.
exactly.
Yeah.
Like simplifying.
Mm.
Do you call it meal prep?
Yes, yeah. I
Okay.
mean,
Because
I don't use that word particularly myself, but yes, in the UK we
yeah,
do.
okay. Because when you were saying planning meals, all of a sudden I realized you were talking about meal prep, which to me is such a diet culture term. And
Same.
that is part of the fear. It's like when people talk about, I know that meal prep helps me. It's like, yeah, but meal prep is loaded as a word, it's the terminology itself is like, that's what I used to do for Whole30. That's what what I mean? It's like this on Sundays, Sunday meal prep, and so there's so much more in that concept. So you're identifying that, like sort of reframing it and maybe not even calling it that, to be able to have new associations with what it's for.
I also
Mm,
think of meal prep as making the food way in advance. That for me is what meal prep means to me. So meal planning would be different because meal
mm.
planning is just on Sunday night, knowing like, okay, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, these are going to be my dinners. I haven't
So
done anything about it yet.
I have a question. So is that a strategy for you? Is that like every Sunday night or some Sunday nights? How does it work for you?
I use Gusto,
What's that?
the recipe boxes. Yesterday, I sat down and I ordered my meals for next week, and it has been a game changer for me. And yeah, if Gusto want to sponsor the podcast, I'd be up for that. I like Gusto because I remember even a while ago, after I'd been having them for a bit, I remember thinking, do Gusto put calories on their
Mm,
recipes? And I looked just to see, and I realized they did. But the fact that they're not big and obvious in your face, they're down in the nutrition information. So if people want to look at that, they're probably legally obliged to put it there anyway.
yeah.
But I like they don't make a thing out of it, and they have loads of meals that are hearty meals as well, and I like that, whereas I found a lot of other recipe boxes, they're just a bit
Yes.
diety to me, like, the
Yes.
meals from a caloric perspective, that's not a dinner to me, I want something
Absolutely.
more substantial. So that's why my meals are taken care of that way, and then I don't have to think. Dinners anyway.
Yeah. I do it with lunches. Again, not every single meal. It's just I have a meal delivery for because lunches are hard for me to figure out and I'm busier and I have less time to decide. So I have a meal delivery for that, which used to be associated with more diety because a lot of the meal deliveries are very diety. But to me, it became about this is just so much more convenient, and I have to think less about it. So that became the draw.
I think many people get tripped up as well with this whole, I know what I should be doing and I can't get myself to do it, is there's so much information out there, so much advice about you could do this, you could do that, meal planning, movement, intuitive eating, mindfulness, all of that. And I think many people are paralyzed with knowing where to even begin with that. And there's a
Mm.
sense of feeling like, okay, tomorrow I'm going to do all these things.
Right.
And it always feels like you're about to start all these things.
Yeah. Your best
And
self.
yeah, back to overwhelm. Like, how are you supposed to hold all that in your mind?
Right. Yeah. So narrowing. Also, another one I think that is a should is being with your emotions instead of binging, or when you're noticing an emotional urge to eat to do this. Again, it's like, what is the thing? It's such another vague idea of being with, sitting with your emotions.
Mm,
That's why in many episodes prior, I'm like, can you tell me exactly what it is that you do? I want to know what it looks like for you. You know, it's helpful to hear because again, it's so abstract, and that it's overwhelming if I'm like, what am I supposed to do now with this? I don't even know what to do. I can't picture it, so I'm not. And then of course you're not good. Again, the not knowing the steps to get there is part of the barrier.
yeah. And you're trying to do something new in a moment where you're probably in a heightened state, you're in an agitated state, or there's an
Mhm.
emotion already here. I
Right.
do a lot of retrospective stuff. You talk about your retrospective parenting. It's a lot of how I do the emotional work. We retrospectively, after the binge, after the event, try and piece it together and make some sense of it. And I think there's for many people, a lot of that needs to happen first before your brain will even be able to recognize it in the
Mm.
moment of emotion. So if you haven't practiced recognizing it outside of that moment, if you practice that, sometimes in the moment you might suddenly get a flash of insight. Be like, oh, I remember now that I've gone through this a few times, and
Yeah.
this is normally what's going on for me. Maybe this is what's going on for me. Maybe this is what I need.
Would you say that, like, looking at this whole conversation, that part of, I don't know, a plan or a beginning to looking at this is simplifying, naming, or identifying a singular thing, um, and picturing or outlining more concretely steps for things?
Yeah. I love encouraging people to ask the question, how do I make this thing easier for me? Not how do I make myself do it? Not I'm just going to do it. How do I make this easier for me? I know I've tried to do this in the past and haven't been able to do it for whatever reason. How do I make it easier? And I think to come back to your point that if this is something you're coming back to and you're hitting a block again and again and again, there's a block there for a reason. That block is something.
Mhm.
So if we can come at it from a curiosity perspective, rather than I'm just trying to bulldoze my way through this block that's just not moving, I think that as well can help shift things for people.
Yeah. What's the next thing you should feel like you should do today?
Well, today is Thursday, and I need to get my weekly email sorted out for tomorrow. I send out an email every Friday, food for thought. If you want to sign up, go to my website. You have a weekly email too, Stef?
I do. It comes out on Wednesdays. You can sign up on my website.
We don't plug our emails normally, our weekly emails. Well, now we have. Yeah, so that is something that I need to do tonight. And maybe this is one for me, actually, that I used to go, oh, if I'd been indoors. So I went out this morning, and then I worked for a couple of hours. Now it's the afternoon. We're recording the podcast. I used to say things like, oh, if I've been in for X number of hours, I should go out for a walk. I should go out for a walk. I've taken that should away. There's part of me now that's going, I might benefit from going out for a walk later, but I'm okay with making that decision later because I don't get in a battle with myself about it. And even when I feel tired, I can stop and go like, okay, I feel tired. Is going for a walk what I need? Sometimes it is when I feel tired. And is resting and not doing anything physical what I need? And sometimes the answer is yes. And sometimes the answer is I don't know. And then I just guess.
Yeah.
And that's fine.
There's no right and wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, good luck.
What have you got any things that you should be doing today? Just for the benefit of the listener, Stef just gave a huge sigh. It wasn't very audible, but your whole body sighed then.
Yeah, I'm not sure what it was about either. I have such a day ahead of me. It's morning here. So when we're done recording, I've got my whole day booked up until 6, and it's quite fast. And afterwards, I guess my shoulds are around. No, I don't think I have any shoulds today. It'll creep up later with around the kids about I should be spending more quality time with the kids, which I should be doing. It feels like a legitimate should. But you know what would help me is to name what it looks like, because again, that's an abstract kind of thing. So perhaps I'll take this. I'd like to sit with each of them and make eye contact with each of them as they tell me about their day after school, after they get home from school. That seems more doable.
Yeah, she'll be like, Julie, you've got 60 seconds. Go.
Go. Staring. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, if I start with a minute, it's a lot less. It's a lot easier to keep going. Again, I set the bar low.
Yeah, of course. then you get to feel like a great parent.
My poor children. Okay. See you next time, everybody. Come see us in New York.
Yeah. See you, Stef.